Really, really wonderful and exciting to be beginning this new journey with you. It's completely appropriate to say the blessing, Shechianu, that we have on beginning something new and arriving at an exciting point. So I'm going to say the blessing. And if you know the blessing and you want to say it with me, you're very, very welcome to, or say in your own version of it. Give thanks for this new beginning that we're embarking on. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shechianu ki'imanu v'kiyanu lazman hazeh. May this learning and practice we're going to do together be beneficial for us all, for each of us, but also for everyone we're connected to, and ultimately for all beings in this very special time that we have ahead of us for growth and transformation. So let's open the source sheet. I'm going to share the screen, share the sheet. So hopefully you will receive the sheet. You can refer to it, but for the sessions we can just look on here. I'm gonna share this. Brilliant. Can you all see the sheet? It worked. Wonderful. So the idea that this time of year has immense power for us to tap into is something that is really explicitly talked about for the first time by the Kabbalists. It's a little bit hinted to in the Zohar, but it's very cryptic. But really, we see the Kabbalists of Safat in northern Israel, in the Galilee, in the 1500s. And these are the same Kabbalists who actually created the Friday night prayer service. Some of you may know Kabbalat Shabbat, and many of our beautiful prayers and songs. And they were the ones to first really pay attention to this time in this way and make it explicit. And this is a teaching from one of them. So it's a teaching, it was written down by Rav Chaim Vital, who is the main conduit we have from teachings from his teacher, who is known as the Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria, who's really the most influential Kabbalist in the last 500 years, certainly. I'm just gonna, once again, this is nobody's fault, but I'm gonna mute everyone just so there's no background noise on the recording, and then we certainly will have a chance to unmute and share between sources. We'll chat and then do practices and share also. Now I'm going to read this source and then a couple of slightly later Hasidic sources which explain how the mystics see the spiritual work of this time of year. All these sources kind of say the same thing in slightly different language, and I hope the idea is by the time we hear the same idea presented in three different ways from three different angles, hopefully we'll be beginning to get what it means to each of us individually, because I'm sure it means different things to different people. So this is, again, Rav Chaim Vital's take on it. He says, the redemption from Egypt had to be performed at that very moment, supernaturally, taking them, the Israelites, out from slavery to freedom, had to be bang. In fact, it's important to mention here that the name of the festival Pesach means a jump. I mean, it's a funny thing. The festival could have been named a lot of different things. It could, the Torah also calls it the festival of the spring, the festival of matzot. We could have called it matzah, we could have called it spring, we could have called it charoset, we could have called it a lot of different things. We call the festival itself jump. And specifically this relates to how during the plague against the firstborn of Egypt, the plague and God doing the plague jumped over the houses of the Israelites. But again, the festival could have been called anything. So the jumping is very much core to the festival. So we were taken out supernaturally from slavery to freedom in this jump. After the Israelites left, there was no need for this anymore. I'm reading again from him, I'm continuing. After they left, there was no need for this anymore, this supernatural jumping. So everything returned to its original nature, wherein we would enter into each level one at a time until the festival of Shavuot. So the first night of Pesach, the first night of Seder, there's a big jump. And then after that, things go back to the way they are normally, when each day has a lesson, an opportunity for growth, has something that we need to do one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. So that's that. And now, as I say, we're going to see two more representations of the same idea in slightly different language, which hopefully will make it more clear. And then we'll come together, we'll discuss, and we'll do a practice on it. So this is a great Hasidic master known as the Avodat Yisrael. They're also known as the Maggid of Koznitz. Poland, 1700s, you can see there in the bio, very, very important, influential early master. So he says, on the first night of Pesach, all of the great healings, or you could also say all the great fixings or rectifications, the Hebrew is tikkunim, So all the great tikkunim, the healings or fixings, were illuminated in one moment in order to take the Israelites out from the iron furnace. That's what the Torah calls our slavery in Egypt, as an iron furnace. From the 49 levels of impurity to the 49 levels of sanctity. So if you imagine this is 0 baseline, and down here is negative 49, that's where we were. And the Kabbalists say that if we would have gone one lower, the Israelites in Egypt actually would have been completely lost. We would not have been able to be removed, because at negative 50, you wipe out. You don't even exist anymore spiritually, as having potential to be who we are. So minus 49 means we were rock bottom. We were as low as we could possibly be. And suddenly on the first night of Pesach, we get this magical supernatural healing. He says, all illuminated one moment, but we don't just go to 0, we actually go to positive 49. So we've gone up 98 levels, 49 here and another 49 above, bang, all in one shot. And he goes on, this is the meaning of, for you departed from Mitzrayim, Egypt, or constriction. That's the Hebrew word for Egypt. It also means constriction in the Torah, Mitzrayim. For you departed from Mitzrayim in haste. The Torah says actually twice. It uses the word bechipazon, in haste, says it twice about the Exodus. We'll get to another case where it's used soon. This quote is from Deuteronomy, at the end of the Torah, looking back, kind of reviewing what happened. So we departed, the Torah says, from Mitzrayim in haste, bechipazon. He goes on, it was not something that we caused. As the Zohar explains, and this is, I think, quite deep and also quite funny, it was like an engagement party in the bride-to-be's father's house. If you imagine a young couple got engaged and they don't have anywhere to have their party, they can't afford to rent anywhere for whatever reason, they have nowhere they can do it. So they had their engagement party in the house of the father of the bride-to-be. And of course, if you're in that situation, and I'm sure we've all been in comparable situations in our lives, one way or the other, where we are kind of beholden to our host in some way, then we're not completely at liberty to take our time necessarily in the way that we might like to, because ultimately we are under somebody else's roof and playing by their rules. So we're told here that the party of us being taken out of Mitzrayim is actually really not being done on our terms. We didn't even cause it, as it says here. It was done from above. We are really playing by God's rules, because God, the Infinite One, is the one who's making it happen. Now, just to finish that teaching, that was not the end of it, there's a bit more. He goes on, and since it was not something that we caused, all the lights and expanded consciousness were illuminated simultaneously, because the hour required this. So again, he's saying, we were at negative 49, and boom, we were suddenly blown way up, 98 levels of consciousness, of purity, to positive 49, because the hour required this. Because something about us being taken out of Mitzrayim required that we be on a certain level, and we weren't going to get there on our own. Carrying on, he says, therefore, after Yetziat Mitzrayim, that's the Hebrew for leaving Egypt, or the place of constriction, after we were taken out of Mitzrayim, the Israelites needed to purify their character traits little by little through their spiritual work until Shavuot. Because that, of course, is what we're going into now in the calendar. We're going to go into Pesach just like the Israelites when they came out of Mitzrayim, according to the Torah, that 7 weeks later they received the Torah. It's Shavuot. And he's saying, yeah, you get that free gift. And sometimes in some of the sources, it's sometimes compared to a treasure. You get this amazing treasure on the first night, but it's not fully yours. And we're going to see this idea articulated one more time in a slightly different way by the Bnei Issachar. The treasure isn't ours, but then we have to work for it, he says, to make it ours one item at a time. And that's what we're going to see now. The Bnei Issachar, another very important Hasidic master, slightly later than the Maggid of Kodnis, and he really took Hasidut from Poland to Hungary. He was one of the founders of the Hasidic movement in Hungary. And he says, the first night of Pesach, when everything is done in haste, and he's quoting this time from Exodus 12, where it describes how we should eat the Pesach offering and the matzah and everything in haste. This is like built, and this is talking about when the Israelites are still in Egypt. They haven't even left yet, and they're being told everything tonight has to happen in haste. So everything is done in haste on this night. He says, and all the lights and abundant flows of consciousness are made for receiving the Torah by an awakening from above. rather than by our actions. So what does it mean? An awakening from above is Kabbalese. It's Kabbalistic language used a lot in the Zohar, quoted one place where it's used there. It's the Zohar's way of saying, we didn't initiate this. And the Zohar talks a lot about cosmic romance between humans and the divine and different parts of the divine. And a kind of rule in the Zohar most of the time is for something to happen above, we have to initiate it below. Usually that is the case. Usually we are the ones, we have to use our free will down here to make something good happen. But certain times are just a gift. Certain things just happen, whether we initiate them or not. And this is one of them. The lights and consciousness, he says the abundant flows of consciousness which happen on the first night of Pesach, at Seder night, are an awakening from above. We just get them. We don't actually cause them. He goes on, similarly, in Mitzrayim, it was not possible to delay until our actions brought about our liberation. So he's actually talking about the present day, and then he jumps back to say, by the way, this is how it was then too. Back 3,000 years ago when our people left Egypt, according to the Torah, it was the same deal. The people didn't really deserve it. They were given the free gift of being taken out. Carrying on, and it is clear that an illumination which our actions did not cause has no enduring existence. We get given this big treasure, but it's not really ours. If we don't really earn it, we don't really integrate it, it's not really part of us. But don't worry, he carries on. Therefore, afterward, the blessed God commanded us the mitzvah, that means commandment or connection, of counting the Omer for 49 days. And we count day after day, level after level, and cause the illuminations which are necessary for receiving the Torah to shine through our own actions, so that it will have an enduring existence. And then follows the day of receiving the Torah. So we get the big treasure on the first night of Pesach. It's amazing. We're like swimming in the riches. We're like, oh my God, this is so great. Look at all this beautiful stuff. But it's not fully ours because we didn't work for it. It actually kind of gets taken away from us temporarily. And then we get to work diligently day by day for each item of it and actually make it ours in a meaningful and sustainable way. Then we get to the 50th day after we've counted through the 49, and that's Shavuot, and we receive the Torah. And what is the Torah that we receive? It's somehow parallel to or in relation to the work that we've done. Like the more that we have worked to go through that treasure and make it ours, then the more of the Torah that we can receive. Yeah, I'll pause there. I know that was a lot of me talking, so now I want to hear from you guys. Questions, comments, feedback, likes, dislikes. Also clarifying questions, very welcome if something wasn't clear to anyone or any questions about the source material. Just wave your hand if you want to say something. Yeah, please, Basia.
In terms of the jump, can it really be said, can it really be considered that the supernatural ended right at the Exodus? Because then after that, there was the pillar of fire and there was the manna.
You're saying it seems from the narrative you're surprised because it doesn't seem like the supernatural miracles suddenly stopped. Is that what you're saying? Right. So I think that's a very fair question. I think my understanding of how the mystics are reading it is, you're right, the miracles continued. We continued to be taken care of by the divine in very supernatural ways. But there was something about the moment of departure that required an enormous jump. That required, basically the Torah says, like God, and we say in the Haggadah, God came down, God's self, and did it. It wasn't an angel, it wasn't a seraph. It was. That's how the story is presented. So something about that moment of Exodus, and I think it's often compared, and I think very skillfully compared to birth. Something about that actual moment of the embryo and the fetus then becoming, a person. There's something incredible about that transformation where everything is reversed and for something new to come to exist. I think that's what the mystics are picking up on there. But you're right, the miracles don't stop. The miracles are ever present throughout life. Let's see, I see a few people have raised their hands. Nancy, you were waving your hand before, is that right? Yeah, please.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I love that. Then it, you know, like our parents scooped us up out of danger, right? And and we experienced that. Like, well, had to happen. But I love then that it becomes our own action because that becomes very experiential and you feel it and you have to have intentionality. So it becomes more your own when it's a result of your. However, the other thing too of like, God like a parent scooping you up and getting you out of danger now is good too.
Right. It's good to be rescued, and it's good to integrate it and be able to eventually be more independent. Beautiful. Thank you for that so well. Well, let's call on folks in order I see them on my screen. Ariella, please.
Thank you. I also am seeing the parallel, so as above, so below, which is big in the Zohar, as well as the phrase, it's on us. The fact that, yeah, God did what God did, but it's on us to be able to receive the Torah. And we're the ones that have to do the work. The work can't be done by a rabbi, by God, by it's we're the ones every day.
100%. That's it, isn't it? It's otherwise it just doesn't go anywhere. So yeah, thank you. Beautiful. Thank you, Ariella. Ellen, please.
I'm sorry, did you call on me?
I did, yeah. Please.
Okay. So I read what you sent this morning, and I had never heard before or comprehended that God took us out of slavery. We didn't quite deserve it. And that resonated for me so deeply. And then the idea of counting the Omer took on much more meaning for me, to work on how we can work to deserve it. And the idea of who God took out of Egypt, they had to wander around in the desert for 40 years, which, metaphorically, I'm a poet, so metaphorically, I can relate to that in the sense of they were working on deserving it. And I just want to say one last thing. This afternoon, my temple is hosting this man, Mark Horn, who wrote a book called Tarot and the Gates of Light. And what he does is he looks at the tarot in relation to the Sephiroth. And for the last 3 years, I've been counting the Omer, using what Mark indicated by looking at the tarot cards, which made it so much more alive and real for me. And then I really started to understand what the Sephiroth represented. So,
thank you. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. Beautiful. I think I might know that guy. I'm gonna mute you again so we can hear from others. But thank you very much, Ellen. Annie, please.
Wow. I think I could just say wow, and that would be enough. It so feeds my optimism to understand more deeply our purpose, to be working on ourselves always, and we have this great opportunity with counting the Omer to really do it in depth. And every year it's different. But I have a really picky point question because I'm so food obsessed. What is this haste? I'm supposed to gobble down the first night. Then, I get the haste of getting out of Egypt and catching the illumination. We got to, we're being almost thrown out in a way, like, it's almost like the Wizard of Oz. Maybe that was kind of unconsciously based on that, being blown out or something. I don't know. That just came to me. But talk more about the haste, because that word was repeated. And could you put the Hebrew word in the chat, please? I'd like
Sure.
to.
Sure, I'll put it in. It's bechipazon. I'll just type it quickly now.
Thank you.
Yeah, but what's going on there seems to me is it's actually very similar to a contraction in a birth process, which I've had the privilege of watching happen. Like, we don't want to miss that wave. If you miss that wave, there might not be another one. In this case, there might not be another one for like 3,000 years, in as opposed to a regular birth. But it's like that. It seems to me by the halakha, the practice of like kind of like eating our matzah quickly and all these things is like to convey to us like alacrity, zirizut. With this is something, if you want to make it happen, sometimes you just have to drop everything. The Torah says like you got to eat it with your stick in your hand and your pack on your back. You just sometimes that's just how it is in life. There are other moments in life where in our process, in our calendar, and our rituals, we're encouraged to be slow and steady and still and contemplative. But sometimes you just got to grab everything and run. And that seems to be the practice there.
Oh, is this zerazut?
Zirizut, exactly. Zirizut, alacrity. Yeah. We'll talk. I think we'll talk more about that in later sessions in the course. It'll keep coming up. Let's hear more from. There are two more folks with their hands up. Ruth, please, if you I'll try and get you on mute. There you go. Hello.
Sure. Thank you.
Sure.
Let's see, my camera's off there. So I just want to say quickly, I've really appreciated when you've come to the IJS sits. So this feels like a super treat to be with you in real time on the screen. I've counted the Omer in 1 or 2 years, and maybe I missed something, but could you just, the 49 below, I kind of am missing the connection. I understand from Pesach to Shavuot, but if you could just say, maybe repeat it or explain a little bit. I'm missing how we understand or where we get the 49 below.
Totally. Actually, I didn't go into it so much, so it's good that you pulled me back to it. Maybe it deserves explaining a bit more. I think the idea is that the people have very much sunk into the spiritual maya of Egypt, of Mitzrayim. The narrative that we see in the Torah and in the commentaries and the mystics is they're just barely holding on to some consciousness of who they are, that they have some consciousness of the divine, they have some narrative about there once was patriarchs and matriarchs, and they have a different destiny in a different place, but they're very, very close to being completely lost and just basically accepting being slaves forever and forgetting about ever making anything else out of their life. And so in the language of the mystics, that's about degrees of impurity, but we can think of it also in terms of degrees of consciousness. Like they're very close to just giving up on freedom, giving up on authenticity, giving up on being who they really are. And it's the mirror of the positive work that we're going to do. And actually, that's a good principle to know about, that in Kabbalah, everything actually basically exists both for the good and for the shadow. Or we could say like for the opportunity and the challenge, and they're very connected. So the people have this like very, very hard situation. They've sunk to this level, and we get this amazing gift of that being flipped on its head all in one go, in 1 second, just to kind of show us it's possible and get us the heck out of there. But then we have to actually do the hard work of making that real and sustainable. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Sandy, last and not least. Let's see. I have to get you to unmute. There you go.
Yes, I've never really heard this phrased in this particular way, the jump, the 40, the minus 49, 49. I'm sorry, I just lost my place. The 49 levels of sanctity. Now, but it all makes sense when I put it with what I already know and what I'm already learning, and what of course I'll never know, but we keep trying. Now this is very basic. So Kabbalah was what, the 15th or 16th century?
So these Kabbalists, the ones that I started
Mhm.
quoting, yeah, were in the 1500s. But there was Kabbalah before that, like the Zohar emerged in the 13th century, and that's really
Okay.
that's seen as like the kind of like main text of Kabbalah.
Uh-huh.
But the Zohar actually says that it's channeled from somebody who lived 1,000 years before that. So there's a spectrum of opinions about we don't really know as the truth. A lot of these teachings might have been oral traditions before they were written down.
Also, the last question is mysticism. Is that part of Kabbalah, part of the Zohar, something separate, or?
Great. Sorry for not defining my terms more clearly. I think Kabbalah is like an example. Kabbalah is like often used as like a synonym for Jewish mysticism, or at least part of it. And by mysticism, in case I apologize for not kind of defining this more clearly, mysticism, I use it to mean, and I think it's often used to mean being concerned with trying to be in union with the divine, trying to achieve divine oneness one way or the other. And obviously every religion, every people, every family, every path has their own way of relating to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Okay, wonderful. Friends, thank you so much for everything that's been shared. I'm sorry that I'm not also able to keep up on the chat. I would love to move forward with a practice. Hina, I see. Wait, I just saw your hand. Hina, did you want to ask something?
I have a very quick question.
Great, please, go for it.
I'm wondering why I never heard the term, I guess it's pisach as a verb, to mean jumping up. Like in all these years, I've never heard that before. How could that be that it was never?
Jumping over. It's interesting. It's not talked about much. It's one of those things. It's the name of the festival, and it's from a verse in the Torah. But it's like when we do the Haggadah and the Seder, and for those of you who do all these rituals, if you've done it once or a million times, it's not talked about much. It's not front and center. But for the mystics, it is. For the mystics, they really hone in on it, and they're like, that's what the whole thing is about. So it's a beautiful thing. Sometimes the mystics will just kind of pay attention to something that we've been missing that was right there all along in front of us, and that's a good example of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for the question. So friends, we have a practice to do. I'm gonna try, hopefully this will work, to paste these prompts in the chat here as well. Yes, that worked, I believe. Yes. So these are prompts which you can actually use for, as it says here, reflection, meaning just to silently meditate with them, or you can do writing or drawing, movement, singing, whatever practice you want that calls to you. I'm going to suggest for most of us in this moment, right here, right now, a good default is probably writing or drawing. I think that's like helpful, but please do whatever feels authentic for you. And I'm also going to share my screen again because the prompts are also in bigger type on the screen. So for you to have them nice and conveniently. So I'm going to share the screen, and then we're going to take 10 minutes for this practice. So share screen. Here we go. And you'll see on the handout, here you go, at the bottom of the page. This is it, the guidance for practice. So let's take 10 minutes and then come back together. And for folks who write or draw or create something that you feel moved to share, there'll be time for that. But also really primarily what we're going to create in this time is just for ourselves. So create with your own process in mind. I'll see you in 10 minutes. That's, let's say, at 45 past the hour or 1:45, we'll come back together.
Hello?
We'll come back together in another couple of minutes. We're going to come back together shortly, so to see if there's a place to bring whatever you've been doing to a natural place to pause it for the time being. Welcome back. I see, I realized that my plan for this session was a little bit too ambitious, because I really would like to have so much more time for sharing. But also we have a whole nother section of learning about the Omer itself and the Sephirot together. So I probably should have just made the session longer and done with. But for now, I'm obviously going to respect everyone's time. So I'm going to say, let's just have a few minutes now for the sharing process. I'm sorry we won't have longer. Does anyone like to share something that came to you during that time? Bracha, please. Let me unmute you.
Hi. So yeah, it's sort of short. And so I wrote, if I could free my voice, that is my hope beyond hope. If I could put wings on self-doubt and shame, deepen my self-love and deepen my trust in the divine and a power greater than myself, that would lead to deep inner peace and it would be exhilarating. It is said that joy is contagious. So I would hope my joy would touch those around me in a balanced, quiet way, a quiet joy.
Thank you, Racha. That's really beautiful. Thank you. Farah, please.
Thank you. Thank you for all the inspiration you bring every time I listen to you. So excited and so grateful. I wrote something, I haven't read it back to myself, and we'll see, for some, it might be a little surprising. Light attracts light, and from knowing comes the illumination. We are on the journey of the structure of 7 times 7, the magical equation built into the cosmos as we arch one day closer into being united with the divine. What is holy in me recognizes what is holy in you, because light only ever seeks to grow. And then, God willing, on our 50th day of honest work, we, my beloved, will share the same cosmic bed.
That's beautiful. Farah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One more, Nancy, and unfortunately, just for the sake of time, I'm going to say I think this is the last one for now. Please, God, we'll have more chance later. Nancy, please. Oh, yeah, go.
Okay.
the distillation of what I wrote is freedom arrives with Elijah's true entrance, a great tikkun. Then all perceive the divine in each one, and all the world's people are liberated.
Powerful. Nancy, thank you. Great, you mentioned Elijah. That's going to come up in our next section. Good segue. I'm going to share my screen again. I'm going to do a little bit more learning, and then hopefully also practice on what we're going to learn. So what we haven't really done so far is explained what is the Omer, what are the Sefirot, these things we're going to count through. That's what we're going to do now. So I'm just going to get to the right place in the sheet. Here we go. So first of all, this is where the Torah commands, connects us, gives us the mitzvah, the commandment or connection of counting these 49 days. And it's originally in the context of a barley offering of all things. And actually it's very beautiful and very deep. It's a barley offering because at the time of Passover, the barley is ready to be harvested. And then what happens is we offer this sheaf of barley every day for 49 days. And then we get to Shavuot when the sacrifice and the grain of Shavuot is not barley, but wheat. And there's a lot of teachings about how this is an evolution from barley, which is an animal food. It's generally when we have enough food, we give the barley to animals, to wheat, which we use to make bread and for humans. So there's there seems to be an evolution, and a lot of sources talk about this, but from our lower self to our higher self, essentially, a development in consciousness. So this is the origin. This is the verse in the Torah where the commandment comes from. And it says, and from that day, and from the day on which you bring the sheaf of elevation offering, that sheaf of barley, the day after the Sabbath, you shall count off 7 weeks. They must be complete. You must count until the day after the 7th week, 50 days, and then you shall bring an offering of new grain to the Eternal. The rabbis have a lot of fun with this. A lot of verses in the Torah, the rabbinic take on it is not exactly the literal take. So we are all one way or the other connected to rabbinic Judaism, as opposed to other traditions which read the Torah more literally. So the Sabbath here is actually the first day of Pesach. And one really beautiful idea that the mystics bring is, just like Shabbat is a gift that we do nothing to deserve, Shabbat is not dependent on us in any way. In terms of, Shabbat just exists, whether or not we even realize it's Shabbat or not. So in the same way, the first day of Pesach has a similar quality. That gift that we get on the first day of Pesach is there, whether we realize it or not, whether we tap into it or not. That's actually not the case for many of our other holy days, which are connected to the calendar in a way that we actually co-create them, and more emphasis is put on the awakening from below, the work that we do to create them. I'm going to move on to the next one just for the sake of time. It's also from the Hasidic master Rav Sadok HaKohen of Lublin. And he says the number 49 is always a complete purification. And this is just, it was already alluded to in some of the writing we just heard. 49 is a very powerful number. And the Torah here says we're going to count these 7 weeks, and then we get to 50 days. And the 50th day is actually Shavuot, the day when we get the Torah. But 49 is such a powerful number because it's 7 times 7. And of course, 7 is what in Judaism, the world is basically built on 7s. We have 7 days in the week and 7 years in the Shemitah cycle, the sabbatical year. And then we actually have a cycle of 7 sabbatical years, which lead up to the Jubilee. The mystics say there's not only we can see it in time, but it's actually also, they say, really how our reality is composed, that time is just one way that manifests. So when you take one of the base numbers on which reality is created and you multiply it by itself, you get something complete in and of itself, a unit, as it were. And that's why the Omer is seen by the mystics as being such a powerful unit of healing, that it's 7 times 7. Now, the mystics, the Kabbalists, really, again, it was hinted to in the Zohar, but it was the mystics in the 1500s in the north of Israel and Tzfat who make this explicit. They connect the 7 weeks of the Omer with the 7 lower Sefirot of the Tree of Life. What are the Sefirot? I'm sure some of you know already, but this is some quick and hopefully helpful, clear definition of what the Sefirot are. There's 3 different things the Sefirot are, at least, but these are, distilled down throughout the evolution of the ideas. Firstly, they're mythical numbers. Every number has a different quality, and the Sifirot actually originate as a number, each one being a different number, that the divine comes into the world through that number with that quality. And this is how the Sifirot appear in our earliest mystical work, Sefer Yetzirah, which is at least as old as the beginning of the Talmudic of the Talmudic era, say, and possibly much older. We don't actually know when a lot of these things existed before they were written down. The second thing the Sefirot are, as they become, as they evolve throughout our text, in Sefer HaBehir, an early Kabbalistic text, is they are emanations, aspects, or attributes of the divine. In other words, character traits of God that we can emulate. But this idea is in the early work in the Bahir is very undeveloped. But then we get the Zohar, and it's really all about the cosmic drama of those character traits of God, which also exist in us, and which basically the Zohar sees everything in existence, everything in the Torah, everything in our lives, as a drama between these forces, which are part of the divine and part of the way, and really each one is part of the way the divine manifests. But very, very important to emphasize, as Daniel Matt does here in these quotes from the Essential Kabbalah, each Sephirah has no independent existence. They may appear to, but that's incorrect. They only really exist in context with each other as part of the divine. So I'm just going to flick to the diagram of the Tree of Life over here. This is all of the Sephirot. They only really exist in a relationship with each other, and you'll see how many of them they connect. Is that not just to one other one? Most of them connect to many others. This is a great diagram of the Sefirot. There are many different ways of drawing it. There's even one which is included here, which is not always, and one which is left out because, two Jews, three opinions, but there are different ways of understanding it. But this is a very, very helpful diagram. And this is what we're going to learn and practice with. And important to say, for the purposes of the Omer, of the 7 weeks, the Kabbalists are only they say that the 7 weeks of the Omer relate to the 7 lower Sefirot. So you can count up from the bottom. You got Shekhinah, Yesod, Hod, Netzach, Tiferet, Gevurah, Chesed. So Chesed is the first week of the Omer. It starts at Chesed, then Gevurah, then Tiferet, then Netzach, then Hod, then Yesod, and Shekhinah. So what's the deal with the upper Sefirot? They are the Sefirot of consciousness or spirit, which don't fully manifest in as concrete a way in our world, in our lives. They're still real, but we don't interact with them in such tangible, concrete ways. So the 7 lower Sefirot really relate to our emotions and our character traits and what we're dealing with on a daily level, whereas the upper Sefirot they're relevant, they're behind the scenes, you might say, but most of us, most of the time, are not necessarily even going to be aware of our interaction with them. Just going back to the sheet for a little bit more. So Gary, we have I think we're ready for we're up to the source from another source from the Arizal, written down by his student Rav Chaim Vital, like the first source we saw at the beginning of the class. So this paragraph is the first time that we get the idea of the practice that we're going to do in this course, and which today is a very popular practice of counting through these qualities and working on ourselves in this way at this time of year. This paragraph here is where it all comes from. So he says, during these 49 days, it is good for a person to intend to repair all that they have wronged in relation to the 7 Sefirot. Again, the 7 lower Sefirot, starting with Chesed. For example, during the first week, they should intend to repair whatever they have wronged or damaged in relation to the Sefirah of Chesed. In the second week, they should intend to repair whatever they have wronged or damaged in relation to the Sefirah of Gevurah, and so on through the 7 weeks. So that's our practice. That's what we're going to do together on this journey. I'm going to come back together. Just coming back together so we can see each other. That's our practice. That's where it comes from, and that's what we're going to do together throughout the whole course, based on those teachings. And the teachings, we're actually not going to read the other teachings on the sheet just for the sake of time now, but what they show is, starting with the Zohar and also the Tikkunei Zohar, the additions to the Zohar, that the Sefirot are also mapped onto our bodies. They also relate not only to our emotions and character traits, but the physical places in our body. And when I first heard this idea, it sounded very strange to me. And then for many years, I've been meditating with the Sifirot and just noticing what happens in the place in the body relating to it when I do. And I'm just extending that invitation for you to notice. There's no right or wrong experience. There's nothing that's supposed to happen. Everyone's going to have a different experience, but it's just a very, very interesting and powerful practice to both work with the character trait and also just to check out the part of the body it relates to and see if there may or may not be anything going on there. So we're going to do some practice based on those teachings, which I'll guide us through in a minute. We're fine for time now because I did that bit a little briefly. So I want to pause now just for questions and comments on the sources we just learned, because I know I covered that fairly speedily. Does anyone have anything you want to ask or say about that? Diana, please.
Thank you. So when it says 49 is a complete purification, and I'm very new to Torah study, but I recall that there was a 50-year, there's a jubilee at 50. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is there any relationship between sort of the jubilee as like a new fresh start, like a forgiveness and freedom, and the 49 of the complete purification?
Completely. Yeah, what this model of the 49 and the 50 you repeat over and over again in different ways. So on the 50th day, after the 49, we get to the 50th day. That's when we receive the revelation, we receive the Torah on Shavuot. And just in the same way, the Jubilee is this big reset, as you say, a big time of forgiveness. And very interestingly, on both of them, the shofar is blown to kind of signify this kind of new consciousness that we're ushering in.
Wow. Thank you. I have to say, just on a personal note, this year I turned 50 and I'm in my 50th year, and this comes to me as like a message, like, this is the year of almost like a rebirth, and there's something mental that happens at 50. For me, at least, it has felt like there's something, but what to do. So this is beautiful. Thank you.
Well, you're so welcome. Thank you for sharing that, Diana. It's great. Shelby, please.
I liked what you just read about using the counting of the Omer, or going through the Sfirot, as sort of a process of teshuvah, because I have counted the Omer in the last few years, but done it more sort of like, where am I now? Where am I going? More a prospective. And it makes a lot of sense, especially when you say, like, we also blow the shofar now, and this is the beginning of the year. So thinking of it also as another sort of like, Elul time, I like that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for naming that. Actually, it's very connected, because in the Torah, in the narrative, in the calendar, Shavuot, no, this is a spoiler for anyone who's not familiar with the story, so sorry if I'm ruining it for anyone, but Shavuot doesn't actually go very well, the original one, because that's when we make the golden calf. So actually, every time we get to Shavuot, and we're going to talk about this during the course, our journey to Shavuot is trying to actually fix it, is trying to do better than the original Shavuot, which ended in disaster, to put it mildly. But then what happens is, Shavuot doesn't go well. We make the golden calf, but then we actually get this process that begins on Shavuot, which leads directly to Yom Kippur, when we're forgiven. And again, Yom Kippur is really our ultimate day of forgiveness and reconciled to the divine, and we get the second tablets. So everything you just said, Shelby, is really like woven into the calendar and what we're going to go through together. Shavuot is both an ending, and really, like a lot of things in our calendar, it's both an ending and a beginning. It's like we're building up to it. And then really it's just going to like kind of propel us to a whole new level of the journey. So thank you for bringing that in. Anyone else want to share anything else or ask anything else about this idea and these sources? Konstantin, please. Konstantin, did you have something?
Oh, yeah. I had a question about the specific use of the phrase intend to repair, and it came twice, like sentence after sentence, as opposed to just repair. you know, what the relation to Sephir of Chesed or relation to Sephir of Geburah. Just curious if that's significant or something random that I'm picking up on.
No, it's significant. I see intention, like lekaven, kavanah is really like a key word. And I think to me, it speaks about the fact that that's the power that we do have. Like that's the free will we have to intend and work towards things. But the result, the outcome, like if it would have said we just should fix it, I think it's suggesting that that's not necessarily fully in our control always. There's a lot of pieces, but we can intend and do our best. You know, I think it speaks to that to me.
Because it's like you know, for Yom Kippur and Elul, I think it is more about embodying or fixing that relationship. And you know, if you don't reach out to someone, that's the rabbinical teachings. If you don't reach out and actually do something about it, then you know it's null. So it's kind of interesting to hear it is about the intention and the personal journey.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. The quality of like Elul and Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is much more about actually doing it, like as you're saying. So yeah, here it's a little bit more like the inner work leading up to that. Yeah, thanks very much. A couple more, and then we should move into practice. Tiferet, please.
Hi, thank you. Yes, so through counting the Omer, we raise up as far as we can go in terms of how much we've invested in learning our Torah, and then you know, from there we try to remember that we've been deemed worthy according to our limitation at that time. We become worthy when we're doing the really hard work of preparing for atonement, Yom Kippur, and we can remind ourselves that back in Shavuot, we did what we thought we knew at the time. And now as we're uncovering things that we did wrong and we're learning, you know, we can remind ourselves too that the blessing comes before we even ever knew about it. So it's like the jumping over. We wouldn't know anything about it, but it is there. So I now feel sort of cradled between Shavuot and that that blessing in advance for the really, really hard stuff. Yom Kippur is really hard for me, and I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's so beautiful and touching. I feel this. I feel in the same way, like myself, my own way, like really held by these multiple points on the calendar that all interrelate. So thank you for putting it so beautifully. Sandy, please.
I think I was going to say something like to Farah that the more we learn, the more we know it's all related. And my rabbi always says everything's in Torah. And I think she's right about that because it's beautiful the way I never really thought of all these different holidays, you know, except the high holidays, that all of these other holidays interact with everything that we do. And it's just fascinating to me. So, and I also wanted to say thank you to the classmates that wrote those absolutely beautiful poems. They're very inspirational.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Sandy. Thanks, everyone. So friends, we have some time now to practice, which is great. Not as long as we might do. And also, I wish we would have more time after the practice to share again, but I don't think that's going to happen. But let's make the most of the time we have in front of us. So this is going to be a meditation that I'm going to guide us through just checking out our relationship with each of the Sephirot, the 7 lower ones we talked about. I'm gonna guide us through it, as I said. It's on the sheet, so you can do it in your own time for much longer. We're just gonna do it now for a few minutes. So make yourself comfortable, please. If you want to keep your camera on, keep it on, turn it off, whatever works for you for a few minutes of meditation. Begin to just bring your attention inside yourself. Begin to just notice what's going on inside. you want to yawn or sigh, take a deep breath. Let the shoulders raise up and drop, however you want to relax. Give yourself permission, welcome with compassion, whatever you notice going on inside. Any sensations, emotions, or thoughts. See if we can be friendly and welcoming to whatever we notice. And we're going to start checking out our relationship with the Sefirot, 7 lower ones, as I said. It's going to be fairly brief meditation this time round, but then you can do it again in your own time for longer. The first one is Chesed. Means loving kindness, but also loving oneness. As Chesed is specifically the kindness that flows from the oneness of all things, the unity of all things. Just like in English, we have that word kind, it's related to kin. So we're just checking out our relationship with that. Where's my Chesed right now? How available or open is it to me, or am I to it? And Chesed, we're told, relates to the right shoulder and the right arm. If you want to check that out too, as part of the practice, just notice what's going on there. I'm going to transition to Gevurah. This relates to the left arm or left shoulder, and it means severity. It also means boundaries. Or we can ask ourselves how that lands with us right now, what it means to us right now. What is the role of Gevurah in our life? How do we relate to it in this moment? And what's going on in that part of our body, in our left arm and shoulder, as we contemplate these things. Next is Tiferet, which relates to our heart. And Tiferet means beauty or harmony. And for the Kabbalists, they often talk about it in relation to something that connects the physical and the spiritual, or the detail and the big picture. So you can apply that however you like in this moment. There's many different ways to explore Tiferet. One way is it's the ladder between the ground and the heavens. Whatever speaks to you in this moment, it's great. Checking out the heart area. My relationship to Tiferet in this moment. Moving on to Netzach. Netzach is the right leg, and Netzach means eternity. It also means triumph or overcoming. It relates to our resilience, our persistence, our determination, our drive for victory, the drive for life, to continue to evolve. And so we can ask ourselves what that means to us right now, what comes up for us right now when we introduce Netzach. Focus on that part of our body, our right leg. And moving on to Hod, the left leg. Hod is gratitude and humility. Many other things too. That's a good place to start for us now. The glory of Hod, the glory of gratitude and humility. You might want to reflect on where we are with gratitude right now. Is there anything we are grateful for? How that feels, what that brings up for us. And then there's Yesod, which relates to our root chakra, the bottom of our upper body, base of our upper body. Yesod is foundation. It's also integrity and sharing. We might want to check in with our integrity in this moment. What does it mean to us? Well, how are we doing with it? And finally, there's Malchut, sovereignty or integration. Malchut sometimes relates to the soles of the feet, also can relate to the womb, if a person has a womb, whichever is relevant for you, the soles of the feet or the womb. And Malchut is that which is actually manifesting through us in each moment, that which we are, so to speak, giving birth to in each moment, that which we're giving to the world. What is coming through me, you, each of us in each moment? Let's bring the practice to a close for now. Just our time is running out and come back together. As we come back together, I want to say thank you to everyone very, very much for your presence and for all the wonderful things that were shared. I really am deeply touched, as always, by that, inspired by that. And I think if we go forward with this course, well, we are going to go forward in this course, but I think I'm going to ask permission from those people who go forward that we might extend these sessions to be a little bit longer, maybe an hour and a half, if for people who can do that, so that we have a bit more time for the sharing and the practice, which is really the heart of what we want to do together. And there'll also be a WhatsApp group where we can share wonderful things like all the beautiful poems that people write and whatever else people want to share. For the people going forward. So thank you everyone very, very, very much, and have a wonderful week. Shavua Tov. And I'll send out the recording and resources. Even the meditation that I just led, I actually have a recorded version of it that I can share, which can be a good resource for folks also. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Shavua Tov. Take care.
Shavua Tov.
Toda Rabah.
Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.